Hello, time travelers. My name is Linda Hofman. I'm lecturer and researcher of sustainable futures at the Fontes Academy for Creative Industries. In this video about the Futures Cone, I will tell you about different kinds of futures and how you can create them. But first, spoiler alert. The future does not exist, although we use the concept of future a lot in the present. We use the future for planning and preparing and to react on in the present. Without a future, it was for us humans not possible to work together, to build bridges, or even have this international foresight project. The future does not exist in the present, but anticipation does. The form the future takes in the present is anticipation. How we use the future is called an anticipatory system. Thus, the integration of the later than now, be it a second or a millennium, into the present is achieved through various kinds of anticipatory systems and processes. These processes can be conscious, but most of the time we are not aware of what our assumptions are. We do react on the future in a subconscious manner. The future can only be imagined, and if you can imagine it, you can create it. Like this fluffy helicopter, the Lilycopter by Joana Vasconcelos. Also, futures is plural. Every person has other kinds of assumptions, and even within one person there can be different kinds of assumptions about the future. To open our assumptions and make them more conscious and to broaden our imagination, we can use different kinds of futures. The future cone is a model that can be used to broaden this perspective on the future. Hancock and Bezold used it firstly to portray alternative futures and based it on the taxonomy of futures by Henty. Henty presented four classes of futures: possible, plausible, probable and preferable future. Joseph Forrest adapted the model and added even more future classes to it, but we in this course stick to the four main classes used by Hancock and Bezold. We start with the narrowest vision on the future. This vision is the most common used version, and without training in future literacy, most people are not aware that they use mostly only this version of the future. The first class of futures are probable futures, those futures we think are likely to happen. They are based on our experience of the past, what we have learned so far, and usually based on, in many cases, quantitative current or market trends. These kind of futures are often presented like the truth, but as we know, change can happen. There is no such thing as the truth if it is about futures. An example of a probable future. In history, we learned from a teacher. Today, children learn from teachers in a school. And the assumption. The next futures we explore are the plausible futures. Plausible, those we think could happen based on our current understanding of how the world works based on physical laws, social processes and insights in the system. To be aware of these futures, we use signals of change, social trends and developments. These futures are often used in scenario planning and gives us insights in what might happen. An example. There is this development in artificial intelligence. Computer can calculate far better than us humans, so computers will replace all jobs that are based on knowledge. Or in the future, it is not necessary to teach children knowledge because computers will replace that knowledge anyhow. The third kind of future we will use are the more science fiction kind of futures, the what possible might happen futures, or the what if futures. These possible futures are based on some future knowledge we do not yet possess, but which we might possess someday. Like in Star Trek, the warp drive. This is future knowledge we are able to imagine. These kind of futures are also used in speculative design to address an issue in society or to open up possibilities for innovations. You never know with these possible futures. Once we can imagine it, we can also put the first preparation to create it. Like designer Arne Hendricks, the incredible shrinking man. This is a speculative design research about the consequences of downsizing the human species to 50 centimeters. It has been a long established trend for people to grow taller. As a direct result, we need more energy, more food and more space. But what if we decided to turn this trend around? What if we use our knowledge to shrink mankind? In this course, we create the possible future by researching the roots of the urgency of your sustainable development goal. We dive into the norms, what is considered normal, and values of the current society according to the problem. If we have found these norms, we pivot this norm and explore a future norm by asking what-if questions and exercising the causes and effect of this pivoted norm in a futures wheel. An example, this is my favorite. We have this obesity problem in modern society. In the future this is solved. In the future it is not necessary to eat anymore. By DNA techniques we are enhance body cells in our skin, and by breathing, sitting in sunlight and drinking mineral water we can make our own food, just like plants. The dreams of a current lifestyle group called the Breatharians will come true. But what happens to society if we do not have to eat? What happens to our behavior if we need sunlight to get nutrition? Well, these questions I will not spoil. You can explore these questions yourself. If we have all these kind of futures, if everything is possible, then we are also able to create a future that we want. And for me personal, the last example of a future that I have mentioned, a future wherein we skip meals, it is not my dream come true. If we can create all those futures, we learn better what we want to avoid, what we expect, but most of all, what we desire, enjoy and hope for. These are the futures that makes us enthusiastic and empowers us. These are called the preferable futures, those we think should or ought to happen. This is the most normative kind of future class that we have. We determine what this future is about. These are the futures, your sustainable version of the preferable future you will use for your prototype to improve society. So, what do you want the future to look like? In the next video about futures, I will explain why we think it is important to be conscious about the future as a sustainable designer.